माऊं। इन पैरों से चल कर तेरे मंदिर कभी न आया, जहाँ जहाँ हो पूजा तेरी कभी न शीश झुकाया। इन पैरों से चल कर तेरे मंदिर कभी न आया, जहाँ जहाँ हो पूजा तेरी कभी न शीश झुकाया। हे गिरधर में द्वार के आया, अब क्या हार चढ़ाऊं। हे पावन परमेश्वर मेरे, मन ही मन शरमाऊं। हे गिरधर मैं हार के आया, अब क्या हार चढ़ाऊं। हे पावन परमेश्वर मेरे, मन ही मन शरमाऊं। तू है या परम्पार दयालु, सारा जगत संभाले। जैसा भी हूँ मैं हो तेरा, अपनी शरण लगा ले। तू है अपरंपार दयालु, सारा जगत संभाले। जैसा भी हूँ मैं हूँ तेरा, अपनी शरण लगा ले। छोड़ के तेरा द्वार दाता और कहीं ना जाऊं। हे पावन परमेश्वर मेरे, मन ही मन शरमाऊं। छोड़ के तेरा द्वार दाता और कहीं ना जाऊं। हे पावन परमेश्वर मेरे, मन ही मन शरमाऊं। छोड़ के तेरा द्वार दाता और कहीं ना जाऊं, हे पावन परमेश्वर मेरे मन ही मन शरमाऊं। छोड़ के तेरा द्वार दाता और कहीं ना जाऊं, हे पावन परमेश्वर मेरी मन ही मन शरमाऊं। छोड़ के तेरा द्वार दाता और कहीं ना जाऊं, हे पावन परमेश्वर मेरे मन ही मन शर।
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Please accept my humble obeisances.
Please accept my humble obeisances, Mataji. This is Prema Tardas. We would like to welcome Her Grace Dinatarini Mataji, who is a very senior disciple of Srila Prabhupada. I will just give a brief introduction about Mataji. Mataji joined ISKCON, Krishna Conscious Movement, in 1970 and was initiated by Srila Prabhupada in 1972 in Dallas, Texas. Mataji traveled to India in 1973 and served in Mumbai, Vrindavan, and also traveled with Srila Prabhupada to Hyderabad and Tirupati. And from 1975 until the passing of Jamuna Mataji in 2011, she was the companion in service with her, and she is the author of her biography and memoir, Yamuna Devi, A Life of Unalloyed Devotion. Mataji, with a small team, is working on a book on Yamuna Mataji, that's DT Studies. So we are very fortunate to have association of Her Grace Dinatarini Mataji, and we would like to welcome her by chanting one time Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna Mataji.
Hare Krishna. So you asked me a series of questions, and I will try to address some of them as I'm capable, as I'm able. Om Adhyana Timirandasya Gyanajana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadadi Swapadantikam. All glories to the assembled devotees. So I was asked how I joined Krishna Consciousness, and you got a brief introduction there. I joined in 1970. I was 20 years old, and it was very difficult for me to join and stay. I had a difficult upbringing, and my way was that if something became difficult anywhere, I would tend to leave. And so I tried joining in 3 different temples over the course of about 6 months, and unfortunately, I was not able to stay for one reason or another. And I went back to where I was staying, my home, and I wrote a letter to Srila Prabhupada. And I didn't know where he was at the time. I just sent it to the New York temple address that was on the Bhagavad Gita. And I said in the letter, what is the position of someone like me who likes Krishna consciousness. I like the philosophy, but I find living in the temples difficult, living in the association of devotees. And so 3 months went by, almost 3 months, didn't hear back. And finally, one little blue air letter came in the mailbox, and it was handwritten by Srila Prabhupada. And he said in there, in order to succeed in Krishna consciousness, 3 things are necessary. He said, first, you must have enthusiasm, and then you must have determination, and then finally, you must have patience. And he said, if any one of these 3 things are missing, you will find the path difficult to traverse. I'm paraphrasing, but that's what he was saying. I never forgot those instructions. It was my first instruction from Srila Prabhupada, and I had reason to remember that instruction so many times over the years. So in 1973, I went to India, and it was there that I actually, although I had had his association before in New Vrindavan and Dallas, it was the first time that I spent any length of time in his association. And I remembered something that later became very profound to me about Vani and Vapu, and I'm certain that many other exalted devotees who have spoken on this platform have spoken about the Vapu and the Vani of the spiritual master. But I remembered something which was very poignant to me, and that was that when I was sitting in front of Srila Prabhupada, although I liked to hear, I often became so absorbed in his personal presence, his aristocratic bearing, the beauty of his movements, the gracefulness, the wonderful way that he interacted with guests and devotees, his amazing sense of humor. All of these things, I would be captivated just staring at him and just taking that all in, that I would actually miss much of what was said. And I would have to go back later and listen to that, listen to what he had actually been saying. And it hit me that actually the present, when the spiritual master is present, there is something so extraordinary in him being with us and him teaching us in his the form that he so beautifully encapsulated, that sometimes the Vani, the instructions, are missed or have to be revisited at another time. So that was something that I remembered in those early days. It helped me later on in my life. After that, 1975, I moved with Yamuna Devi to Oregon. We started a small ashram there. And we were there until 1979. And during that time, on 3 occasions for me, and 4 or 5 for Yamuna, we had Srila Prabhupada's association in Los Angeles and India. And he said so many wonderful things to us at that time, so many instructions for our life in Krishna consciousness. But another thing that happened was that perhaps it was because Yamuna was one of Srila Prabhupada's earliest disciples, and she had already seen him become very ill and go back to India, and knew that his health was problematic. But when we were in Oregon, and kindly devotees who were traveling with Srila Prabhupada would give us regular updates, and we would also write to Srila Prabhupada. And we began to place him, not just see his physical presence, but feel him in our hearts to a greater degree than even his physical presence. And it was, we believe, Krishna's way of training us ahead of time to understand that our spiritual master would not be on this physical plane for much longer, but he was in our hearts, and we learned to see him along with Paramatma within our hearts. So I was reflecting on this, so that when he passed, of course, there was great grief, which was exacerbated by tumultuous circumstances within our society immediately after his passing. But I think for all of us, we felt such an incredible loss, but yet for at least myself, I felt him within my heart very strongly. So he was not away from me, if that makes sense. And I was looking at something Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said about seeing the spiritual master always encasing him within the core of our hearts. He said, if out of good fortune we can feel the spiritual master's presence in our heart, if we can see the spiritual master traveling and walking in our heart, then the Supreme Lord will manifest in our heart too. There is no way to attain the Lord's service other than by serving and satisfying that personality who always inspires us to offer our devotion to the Lord. There's another very interesting thing about that, about placing the spiritual master forever in the heart. One of the interesting things that I noticed of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's preaching was that he always spoke of his spiritual master in the present tense. He was in 1914 when Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur passed. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was 40, and Srila Gaura Das Babaji Maharaj passed 1 year later. He was 41, but he always spoke in the present tense. And I want to share with you one of these very humble present tense stories that he told. He said, the spiritual master is extremely dear to Nanda Nandana. An unqualified person like me cannot serve such a spiritual master with body, mind, and speech. Yet my spiritual master, who is an ocean of mercy and affection, empowers me out of his causeless mercy and treats me with an abundance of love. He is so merciful. If I can attain his mercy, if I can realize that I have no other well-wisher in this world, then simply by his causeless mercy, I will be able to attain the qualification to engage in his service. He is pleased by affectionate service. On the day he bestows his causeless mercy on me and becomes pleased with me, I will properly understand Hari Katha. Then nothing other than service of Guru and Krishna will remain important to me. So this was consistent within his writings, within his speeches and his preaching, that he always referred to them in the present tense because they were always with him at every step. And I was fortunate enough that because I didn't have so much direct association with Srila Prabhupada, that we were trained in many ways to internalize and place within our hearts our spiritual master. So we didn't feel his absence as horribly as one could feel his absence. And that is one of the beautiful things about this Krishna consciousness, is that everything is there for us to understand and to grow with. So I wanted to tell another story illustrating this. And this happened between Srila Prabhupada and Yamuna Devi in India at the Magh Mela, the early 70s. She had, from the very beginning, always sat next to Srila Prabhupada when he spoke, because she liked to be close to him, to his person. And she would take copious notes. I still have the notebooks that remain that are just very small writing of trying to capture every word that he was saying. So when they were at the Magh Mela, when they came to India, this happened all through San Francisco and London. And then they came to India and they were traveling with the World Sankirtan Party, Srila Prabhupada. And they arrived at the Magh Mela, and Yamuna took her usual place when Srila Prabhupada lectured, sitting up front. And one sannyasi came to her afterwards and he said, "Do you see where all the women are sitting?" And Yamuna said, "No, I hadn't really noticed, you know." He said, "Well, you have to sit in the back now, you know, because that's where the women are sitting." So Yamuna, being very humble by nature, the next day when Srila Prabhupada spoke, she sat in the back. And afterwards, Srila Prabhupada, of course, he noticed her absence. Afterwards, he called her over and he said, "You didn't like what I was speaking today?" And Yamuna said, "Oh, he was speaking about the Ajamil, the glorious history of the life of Ajamil." And he said, "You don't like what I'm speaking?" And she said, "No, Srila Prabhupada." She became very emotional. She said, I love it so much." And he said, "Well, why did you go to the back?" And Srila Prabhupada said, "Well," Jumana said, "Srila Prabhupada, one sannyasi told me that it was proper for the women to sit in the back here." And Srila Prabhupada said, "Yes, that is the etiquette." And he said, "But he said, I am speaking this story, this history of Ajamil, because you want to hear it so much." So then Yamuna, feeling great separation from Srila Prabhupada at that time and knowing that things might be changing with her position, she said, "Srila Prabhupada, how much actual association did you have with your spiritual master?" And Srila Prabhupada became very adamant and he said, "I have never been apart for him, not for 1 minute." And Jamuna was a little taken aback by that. And she said, "But actually, how much time were you in his physical presence?" And Srila Prabhupada said, "Only 5 or 6 times." He said, "But we walked and talked so many intimate things." So I always remember, Jamuna told that story many times in her life, because it's so instructive to all of us. And I had remembered, when I was thinking back on this story before I was speaking today, I had remembered how Srila Prabhupada would often become very emotional when speaking on the appearance and disappearance days of his own Guru Maharaj. And I remembered this one lecture that he gave in Atlanta in 1975 on the appearance day, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And he said this: "So he wanted this," speaking of his Guru Maharaj, "and it is not that he is dead and gone. That is not spiritual understanding. Even ordinary living being, he does not die. Nahanyate hanyamine sarire. And what to speak of such exalted, authorized personality like Bhakti Siddhanta? He is seeing. I never feel that I am alone. Of course, when I came to your country without any friend, without any means, practically just like a vagabond I came, but I had full faith that my Guru Maharaj is with me. I never lost this faith, and that is fact. There are 2 words, Vani and Vapu. Vani means words, and Vapu means this physical body. So Vani is more important than the Vapu. Vapu will be finished. This is material body, it will be finished. That is the nature. But if we keep to the Vani, to the words of the spiritual master, then we remain very fixed up. It doesn't matter." So I often feel that sometimes when we think of the Vani, that now our spiritual master has left us, that we only have the words, and the words can be somewhat sometimes feel impersonal to us, if that's the right word, not the same. But actually, if we understand and learn to take that the spiritual master resides within our heart, along with our Paramatma, and that we are never alone, that he is always with us, then we can feel his presence as much as if he were physically here. And that is the goal for any disciple, to try to achieve that. And once we do achieve that, then we never feel alone. We never feel bereft, because he is not gone. He is with us always. So are there questions, or would you like me to elaborate on anything?
Mataji, there is no question so far. You can narrate more pastime, or you can speak something more.
I can speak something about, a little bit about some experience with His Holiness Bhakti Charu Maharaj. I didn't know him very well, but I did have the opportunity of having his association a couple of times, a few times. And I was remembering one particularly interesting and rather humorous time. There was, we were living in Washington, DC area, and there was a friend of ours there who, whenever Bhakti Charu Swami came to the Washington area, he would stay with this friend. And Yamuna and I were staying there at one time. She was working on her second cookbook, Yamuna's Table. And interestingly enough, as opposed to the first book, the second book was supposed to be lighter, easier, more healthy recipes. So Bhakti Charu Maharaj wanted to cook this one night. And he was in the kitchen cooking, and Yamuna was thinking, well, let's have this wonderful Indian meal. And we went in and we were looking, and he had actually made a kind of a, what he called a German potato au gratin dish, but he had put like 2 packages of cheddar cheese in the dish with the potatoes. And Yamuna was just awed by it. He loved this dish so much, but it was something that certainly wouldn't have gone in the cookbook there. And she was a little surprised and asked him, where did you learn to cook this dish? And he said he learned it from a German woman or someone when he was studying there. And we laughed about it because it was so much the opposite. All of us laughed. And I remember him as being very, very humble, very sweet, and a little bit shy at that time. But so much enjoyed hearing him speak, having his association. We're all so fortunate in that way when we get the association of wonderful, exalted devotees in this way. So are there any questions or?
Yes, Mataji, there are a few questions you can answer. There is one devotee, Saurav Gaurav. Can you please tell us something about Yamuna Mataji?
I wrote 2 books on her, so I'm not really sure. Could they be more specific? What about? What specifically? What aspect of her would they like to hear about?
Gaurav, you can speak. I am unmuting you. Yes, Gaurav.
Hare Krishna Mataji. Please accept my humble obeisance, Mataji.
Please accept mine.
Mataji, I was asking like something about Yamuna Mataji. Like we have heard about her very much. Like she's a very exalted devotee serving Srila Prabhupada. So I just wanted to know something about her more, as you was her constant companion, and some qualities, so that we can invite those qualities in us, and so on.
Her qualities. I think first and foremost, what comes to my mind was her dedication. From the very beginning, she was 100% dedicated to Srila Prabhupada's service and to his mission. Other devotees will tell you she was always the first to rise. She would, when they were in London, she would stay. When she was serving him there, she would rise when he did at 1:30 at 2 in the morning. And she would just sit at the bottom of the stairs. I'm thinking of when they were at John Lennon's house, a story that she told, that she's sitting at the bottom of the stairs, chanting very quietly, and Srila Prabhupada is in his room, but he knew she was there. And so he would call her Yamuna. And she didn't know how he knew she was there, but he knew her nature. He knew that this was her nature, that she would want to be up when he was up, so that she would be available for any service that he might need. So dedication, first and foremost, that remained throughout her life. In every service that she performed, she was very expert at everything. Interestingly, I was speaking to some devotee friends in Mumbai and realizing the other day how many amazing qualities and talents they had. And it reminded me, Jamuna was so talented in so many fields. Anything that she wanted to execute in terms of her service, she did with great talent and with great devotion. And that's evident in everything. As a matter of fact, I think it was mentioned earlier, we've been working for the last 1.5 years, 2 years on preparing her deity book studies for publication. And what happened was when she was in India, Srila Prabhupada asked her in the early days to go and study from the major Vrindavan temples, their Seva Puja, their deity worship. And she took this in order to prepare for the Vrindavan temple. She took that very seriously and began immediately preparing this, what we always called her deity book, which is full of her drawings, illustrations, what she learned from the various temples. And some of the Sevites in those temples gave her great access to their knowledge. And so this book is coming out, and it shows again how dedicated she was to serving Srila Prabhupada's instructions, his mission. Another of her qualities that I think everyone who knew her felt very strongly was she had a tremendous compassion for everyone. She never met a stranger, and was always available to hear, to encourage, to support others in any way that she could. Even when she was ill, she maintained a very prolific email correspondence with so many, encouraging, especially the younger generation. And she had a very heartfelt desire to help women in ISKCON. And that was also another aspect of her compassion, her empathy. So that was also something very, very prominent in her qualities. She was extremely humble. She never liked to see herself honored or put forward in any way. Even in the later years, she didn't like to lead kirtan. She just didn't want to see herself in that way. Just by her nature, she was extremely humble, naturally, the whole time that I knew her. Yes, she was very kind, very understanding. She didn't like to judge others. She didn't like to criticize. Those were some of the prominent qualities of Yamuna Devi that we can all hopefully imbibe within ourselves in our growth in Krishna consciousness. Any other questions? Well, if there's not, then I guess I should. Someone has raised a hand. I don't really know how to. Did you face any problems? Yes, many. We all face problems. Many.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
I just would like to hear if you have some specific anecdotes concerning His Holiness Guru Maharaj. Do you have something special to say about Guru Maharaj in your encounters with him? Have you ever?
Just that, just what I said. I didn't have many encounters with him.
Okay.
But I appreciated him very much. I had a deep appreciation for him and his example of what it means to be a Vaishnava Guru. As I said before, in my small association with him, he was extremely kind, gentle, almost shy. But when he spoke with a certainty in what he was giving in his terms of his Krishna consciousness. And I think that all the disciples certainly felt that. I certainly felt it as a God sister. I was always very, very appreciative of him in so many ways. We were speaking about qualities, and he had so many amazing qualities of a devotee. We're all very fortunate.
Hare Krishna Mataji. There is another question by Sachendra Krishna Prabhu. Hare Krishna Mataji, how to imbibe that feeling of Guru within the heart so that we can tangibly feel Gurudev?
I believe it's a training process. It's that through the chanting, through the following of the principles of Krishna consciousness, through the association with devotees, we get so many strengths within. And but we have to specifically train ourselves to feel, to see within the heart our spiritual master's teachings and his examples. And that's the wonderful fortune that all of you have had by having his vapu, his example, is that you, even to this day, and this is so many years after Srila Prabhupada has left, even though we have the wonderful movies and tapes and the videos that were taken of him over the years, I can simply recall his name and he's there, he's present before me, because by Krishna's grace, I was able to, Jamuna and I were both able to learn that before he even left us. So it is something that is trained, and it starts with the ability to understand, to look within, to be introspective and understand that. And even in our daily lives, it manifests in so many ways. As I was reading what Srila Prabhupada was saying, I'm never alone because he's in my heart. He's never far from me. And I feel that way as well.
Thank you, Mataji. There is another question by Devi Radhika Mataji. Hare Krishna, Mataji. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you so much for giving your association today. Over the last few weeks, we have experienced an outpouring of love and appreciation for His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami. Along with this, there have also been profuse expressions of support for Maharaj's disciples and well-wishers. Would you please comment on whether, if gratefully acknowledged and accepted, such mercy would empower the devotees to make advancement in their spiritual life? Thank you, your servant, Deviradhika Mataji.
Absolutely, without question. Yes, we're all dependent on the support and encouragement of devotees. And I'm just so thrilled to see how you have reached out, how you have all reached out to the devotee community for support and well wishes at this time. And I'm certain that you will all feel great strength from that in the coming days and months and years of your life. It's almost intangible how we feel such mercy and strength through the well wishes of other devotees. But that's the power of sadhu sangha. It's something that you may not even notice immediately, but it comes in waves, and it encourages in waves. And I'm certain that you will all become stronger and even more fixed in your devotional service in the coming months and years. Just as we had to learn, we also had to learn to deal with the passing of our Guru Maharaj, and yet we, as I said before, for many of us, he is with us all the time.
Hare Krishna, thank you, Mataji. There is one question by Manu Prabhu. Hare Krishna, Mataji, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you for sharing your realizations. Can you please share something about importance of Samadhi and how disciples can connect with Guru Maharaj through his Vapu presence in the form of Samadhi?
Yes, one of my favorite subjects. Anyone who knows me knows that when I go to the Holy Dham, I spend more time at the Samadhis than I do at the temples. There is a wonderful, and I can't quote exactly who it was that said this of our previous acharyas, but it is said that at the Samadhis of greatly realized souls, they leave and they are present there in terms of their mercy, in terms of giving that mercy to others. So if you go to the Samadhi and you pray for the mercy of the Acharya, there is, that mercy is generously and graciously offered to you. And I have felt that so often in my life as well. That's why having the Samadhis is so important, because it gives us that direct connection with our Guru, with previous acharyas as well.
Thank you, Mataji. There is a question by Uttam Shlok Prabhu. Did you had faced any problem in early stage of life as movement started as being a woman. Can you please tell the story about how did you able to fix your mind in Krishna consciousness?
It's a good question. It's an interesting question. I remember in the early days, we were so engaged and absorbed in the service of Srila Prabhupada, very happily in his service, that I didn't really notice in the very, very early days that there was any distinction, even though there was. But it didn't impact me until a couple of years later. And then I found it very difficult because, of course, in the West, we were raised as equals, and this kind of distinction was not something that we had to face or confront in our lives. So it was very difficult, especially in the mid 70s. There was some misunderstandings of how to place women within our society, and that was worked out more later. But for some period of years, it was extremely difficult for many women because we just didn't understand how to apply Vedic culture or Varnashram Dharma within our society. So many opinions came and misconstructions came. But in order to try to progress as an aspiring devotee, there has to be a point at which you subvert your thoughts of any disparity that you feel has happened to you, and look at the overall picture that we are in this life to go back to Godhead, regardless of our body, whether male or female, and that everything else is peripheral to that our focus and our concentration has to be on what do I need to do to please my spiritual master, to please Krishna? What do I need to do to try to make advancement in this process of Krishna consciousness? And when we do that, then disturbances may be there, but they don't overwhelm us. They don't become the central focus. They become something to be dealt with peripherally, but our focus is on the process and on the chanting and on advancing, trying to advance in Krishna consciousness, like that.
Hare Krishna Mataji, there is one question. Can you please share some of most inspiring moments from life of Yamuna Mataji as you wrote her biography?
Oh, I can only speak in generalizations because there's too many specifics. One thing that I will say about our companionship in life is that we never took each other for granted. I think that's very important in any sangha that you have with anyone, is that there is always that sense that you are grateful to have this association and this sangha. And as long as you have that, you can respect others and receive that respect back in the same way. And we tried very diligently to always keep that in the forefront of our lives and our service together. I think that's a very important point in any. It's interesting because there was, during the time that all this tumult was going on, 1975, we had gone to Oregon and we had started a small ashram there. And Srila Prabhupada was actually going to come and visit us there in Oregon, and the temple president in Los Angeles didn't want Srila Prabhupada to come because so many devotees in Los Angeles had been waiting for his association. So they arranged for us to go down there. And a dear god brother of ours arranged that we would spend every morning from 3:30 to 4:30 with Srila Prabhupada in his rooms. So at that time, we were being criticized quite a bit by some of the leaders for leaving and going to Oregon and starting our ashram there. But we were very, very happy there and preparing for deity worship and, very much engaged preaching. And so this one morning, Jamuna said to Srila Prabhupada, if you want to send us somewhere, we're willing to go wherever you'd like to go. And he immediately said, you Westerners are so restless. Why can't you stay in one place? And then Yamuna said, but Srila Prabhupada, they're saying that we don't have enough association there. And if we don't have enough association, we'll fall down and we won't get your mercy. Srila Prabhupada looked very gravely at her and he said, association can be 2 or 200. He said, if you're 2 and you're compatible, you can go back to Godhead. But if you're 200 and you're not compatible, and then he opened his eyes very wide, like he did sometimes, and he said, but if you're 200 and you're not compatible, no one will make any advancement. So we took that instruction very seriously throughout our life. The importance of trying to, as hard as we can, to keep respectful relationships with each other. I think that's very important, something to be aspired to and lived in.
Hare Krishna Mataji, there is one similar question. Hare Krishna Mataji, forgive me for being forward in asking this question, but can you please share any mystical experiences you have had with Yamuna Devidasi in your journey of Krishna consciousness?
It's a hard question because they're 38 years. So I think I will share her last days because even though Yamuna had so many physical disabilities in her last 3 years of her life, in the last year we were living in Melbourne, Florida. And even though she had these disabilities, she was full of joy, full of happiness, not at all fearful in any way, and very much at peace. And we shared some of the most special times during those days. The devotees would come and visit, and we would have kirtans and wonderful sangha. And Yamuna was so very giving of herself. If someone would come down, even in her very last days, she would, from the very early morning, get up and go cook special prasadam for them when they would come. She did this regularly. She was also very humorous during this time. She was always humorous, but during this time, somehow it seemed to come out more in wonderful ways. So I remember those last days with great affection and with great meaning, because they taught me how to live, or as Srila Sridhar Maharaj used to say, how to die to live, just understanding that the future is very bright whenever you have to leave this earthly realm, this body, the future is very bright. We've been promised that by Krishna and Bhagavad Gita, by Srila Prabhupada, by all of our previous acharyas. So we have only wonderful things to look forward to in this journey. So I'm just remembering that.
There is a question by Shivam Tiwari. Hare Krishna Mataji, please accept my humble obeisances. When we think that there will be no spiritual Srila Prabhupada disciples like you, our heart suffers a deep pain. It feels that we shall keep you all with us always. Mataji, can you please enlighten how can we keep you all wonderful disciples in our heart?
I think that we can make the comparison between how we keep our previous acharyas in our heart. I have kept Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur in my heart by reading about him and his books. I remember in the early days, I was a bit afraid of him because all we had was his introduction in the Brahma Samhita. Srila Prabhupada made a tape of that. The material demeanor cannot possibly. And it was very difficult to read some of what he wrote in English at that time because he was so erudite and a little bit, Prabhupada would tell us he's a Shringa Guru and, how stalwart and staunch he was. But it wasn't until I went to India first and started researching mostly female acharyas, trying to understand them more, that I delved more into Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur's life and his person. Now there are wonderful biographies out. And I just felt such a strong connection to his words. And also Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur, because we have his prayers and we have been singing his prayers for years and years and years, and a connection develops from that, from just that association, the association with his Vani, his prayers. And I feel that very strongly with Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So it may not be a precise comparison because, of course, in my own case, I'm, just an aspiring bhakti. But in other ways, it's similar because just like we feel such a strong connection to Prabhupada, to our previous acharyas, and we have so much information about them now, and we have their writings, we can feel that connection deeply. So similarly, you can also feel, beginning with Srila Prabhupada's disciples and on up, hopefully, previous acharyas as well.
Thank you, Mataji. There is one last question. Hare Krishna, thank you, Mataji. So lovely to hear. Can you please tell us about how Yamuna Mataji tried to help women devotees?
Perhaps her example itself is the greatest way that she tried to help. It was always our desire from the very beginning. When we went to Oregon in 1975, Srila Prabhupada asked us to start a women's program there. And there was some resistance from the leaders, some leaders, because they felt that that other women would want to leave and do something similar, and they didn't want that to happen. So that was always the thought from the beginning, was to have a women's program where women who were serious and not married could come, and then in the association of other like-minded women, we could serve together and advance in that way. But through the years, for some reason, Krishna did not desire that kind of program to expand. And we tried a couple of more times and were not successful. And then later on, it became an issue of finances, of not being able to do it because of finances. But she was always encouraging women and being and supporting women in terms of their ability to be seen as individuals on the path of Krishna consciousness, with as much propensity, as much ability to advance on the path back to Godhead as anyone, as each of us has. And she was very encouraging in that way. I think many women would step forward and have stepped forward over the years to speak of how Yamuna encouraged them in their Krishna conscious lives.
Hare Krishna Mataji. One more question. When Lord comes, he comes with his associates, and when Prabhupada come, all of his disciples came for Gaurang Mahaprabhu's movement. Do you think all the disciples of Prabhupada here on earth came here on earth to spread Krishna consciousness, and one of you in it? What do you think about it?
I couldn't speculate on that at all. You know, all I can say is that for some disciples, being with Srila Prabhupada wherever he is was their ultimate goal in life, in terms of their relationship with him. And Yamuna Devi was one of those. She used to always say, I don't have desire to go back to Krishna, but I want to. She used to actually pray before our deities, Sri Sri Radhabana Bihari. She would pray that I pray that I may have done enough, or that you see the desire within my heart to allow me to go wherever Srila Prabhupada has gone. That was her one prayer, that she every day she would pray like that in her last year.
Hare Krishna Mataji, these were all questions.
Okay.
Thank you very much for addressing all the questions very nicely. So we express our heartfelt gratitude to Dinatarini Mataji for enlightening us.
Thank you so much for having me. It was very inspiring to see how you are dealing with all of this, and it's encouraging to me to see how you're moving forward. And I pray that all of you keep Bhakti Charu Maharaj within your hearts forever. And I'm certain that you will.
Thank you, Mataji. So thank you for enlightening us. Mataji very nicely guided us on that. How the three things we should not miss in our life, that was enthusiasm, determination, and patience. That was first teaching from Srila Prabhupada
Yes.
to her. And how to place a spiritual master always within our heart. And Mataji very nicely narrated the story of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, referring his spiritual master in present tense always. And another pastime from Srila Prabhupada life, that how once Yamuna Mataji told, and Prabhupada very adamantly answered that I have never been apart from my spiritual master even for a moment. And Mataji enlightened us on how we should learn and practice to see spiritual master within our heart, and addressed all the relevant questions. So we beg for your blessings to empower us so that we can follow all these teachings and become loyal servant of Srila Prabhupada and continue to serve in ISKCON whole life. And we beg you kindly visit Ujjain sometime. This is one of the most important project that His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj started. So looking for your association. Hare Krishna.
Thank you
So
so
we
much.
thanks Mataji by loudly chanting one time Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Krishna
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 Krishna,
Krishna
Hare
Hare
Hare,
Hare
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 Rama,
Rama
Hare
Hare
Rama,
Rama
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 Rama,
Rama
Hare
Hare
Hare.
Hare.
Her
All
Grace Dinatarini
glories to
Mataji ki
Sankara.
Jai, Jagadguru
Hare
Srila
Krishna.
Prabhupada ki Jai, Gaur
Hare Bol.
Premanande, Hare Hare Bol, Hare Krishna Mataji.